MenScape, the podcast with Carl.J. Ashley.
So, good evening and welcome to the October MenScape podcast with today's guest, the one and only Mr. Kieran O'Brien. How are you doing, Kieran?
Good, thanks.
I suppose
Very
I
well.
better mention that we're sponsored by the Right Coach this time. If anyone's interested, www.rightcoach.ie. So feel free to tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
So as you already said, that's my name. I live in Nenagh, North Tipperary. I'm divorced. I have 3 boys, 28, 24 and 17. 3 of them live with me. And I work as a landscape gardener, part-time basis, and I work in one of the Ashari centres for teenagers. It's the Ashling Centre in Ballyragger for treating 15 to 21-year-olds for drug addiction. And it's residential, and I do the therapeutic horticulture with them and life skills. So it's a coaching role where I just look at areas for improvement where girls can learn new skills. It can be anything from baking to having a discussion or a debate about why we'd start drugs, or even God, or whatever debate may be come in. So anything that would bring some substance to somebody's life, we'll have a look at it somewhere or another along the way.
Brilliant.
Filling a dishwasher.
Well, it was interesting you mentioned God there, because God was what came to mind when you mentioned gardening, because you're no closer to God than when you're in a garden on this earth, so they say, surrounded by nature. And fair play to you, kudos to you for the work that you're doing, helping that particular age group. Therapeutic horticulture sounds like something we should all be doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because the research supports it. There's really strong research to show that when you're out in the landscape, out in the garden, for example, when you're inhaling, you're digging a garden, you're inhaling all these microbes that's coming up from the soil, like we do, we inhale everything. But these have a real positive psychological effect on our mental health. So they're really positive. They've also shown that being out, you've heard of forest therapy, just being out or being able to see landscapes, being amongst trees, our blood pressure drops within about 10 minutes when we're in kind of wooded or those type of areas. In addition, they've shown that people in hospital that have a view, they can see greenery or trees, are likely to get better quicker. And as we know, we get better quicker at home if we have the right treatment and stuff. But yeah, all around, once you're out in nature, fresh air and sunshine, it's God's gift to us, if you like. And it's interesting that you come across the people here, lads and girls that have huge resistance to it from time to time. And you'd always be trying to bring the piece to them about the facts. This is the facts of it, and it does help and it does work. And anybody who actively embraces it, engages it, they always come back to me and say, I'm really glad I did the horticulture. I really enjoyed it. And you have to let yourself go. It's like everything else. If there's a resistance there and you're not up for it, it's not really going to be work for you too much, because it's all going to be done under duress and your mind is somewhere else. But having said that, it's they do the psychodrama here on a Thursday afternoon, and the horticulture is run in tandem to that. So it's like people are in a difficult situation in one level, and then they come out to me to get grounded, if you like. And that's my job, is to ground them, literally get them back into the ground, get them working in the soil, get them sticking their hands into something so that they start to forget about where they're at and give them a break. So that's what it's about, and it really works in that context.
Yeah, I'm delighted for you that you're doing something where there's obviously a tangent and sort of constructive sort of role to play in the community. Is it mostly lads that are coming to you off the back of, say, either homelessness or divorced parents and families, or tough demographic areas where there's poverty, crime and unemployment? Or is it just an absolute mishmash, random situations, random people? Or are you starting to see some, shall we say, correlation in the circumstances of the people that you're working with? And I'm thinking about, when I say this, I'm thinking about a lot of the research I've done with on Dr. Gabor Mate and what he was saying about the underlying root causes of addictions and stuff.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, well, the people come in from across the board. They're all demographics. The age is getting younger. Young fella came in there this afternoon. He's just turned 15. So cannabis is the predominant drug at that age usually, but some people can have gone on to many more different things at that point. Poverty is a huge issue. Obviously, people from those areas that you described, that they don't have the same resources, and trauma obviously is a huge issue as well. So people come in here and they go through a detox process for maybe a week or two, depending on the particular drug that they're addicted to, and then they spend maybe the next 6 to 7, maybe 8 weeks at times going through a process here. It's based on the Minnesota model, which is based on the 12-step program, and there's other modalities that they bring in along with that. So there's a number of addiction therapists here, and they work with the people on a daily basis. So there's maybe three people per therapist or something. So there's nearly up to 40 people here employed to look after around 12 people. In all aspects of it, from receptionist to the gardener, to my role, to the therapist, to the boss. And trauma is a very significant. Homelessness is very significant. If they haven't been born in broken families, their addiction may take them into that area. And you'll notice that the Oberstown send in people, the HSE. So there's a lot of people coming here funded. It's an expensive program, as you can imagine, looking after somebody for 8 weeks in a facility like this with that many people employed. There's a significant cost. So it's expensive, but like I say, there's a facility there for somebody to get well or get sober, if you like, if they're interested and if the enthusiasm is there. Some people come in for many different reasons. They come in because they have to come in. They're coming in because they want to get out of jail. They have a court. There's some issue in court, and if they do the time here, they might get off. So there's a number of different reasons. But within the time they spend here, some people come in just for that reason. But sometimes their point of view may change, and they may start to embrace the program. So up until that time, there's a kind of a resistance within them to what goes on here, and so all sorts of different dynamics can kick off. So it's just being grounded and being able to deal with all that stuff when it does come up is the important thing here. Nothing is personal, because you'd see a lot of anger here, a lot of emotion here, a lot of people hurt, damaged people. People come in here damaged from all walks of life, and it's physical, emotional, mental, spiritual damage, and it's remarkable to see even young people grasping onto something and embracing and running it and turning their lives around. So the first thing you see is they start to put on a bit of weight. Usually they're really razor thin, and they're sharp and they're nippy, and they're aggressive, and they're angry, and they're like the normal teenager, but multiplied by 4 or 5. And so there's that piece there. So after a while, that kind of settles down, but you see them starting the bit of base fills out a bit, and they start to relax a little bit. But
this happened to me in my 40s, Kieran. I started to put on a bit of weight and start to get a bit more contented in life, and gave up drinking, gave up smoking, and other bad behavior patterns. But going back to when I was about 15, thankfully I didn't have to go through homelessness. Really thankful and grateful I didn't have to deal with that one.
Yeah.
But I was smoking plenty of weed, and the only problem I had when I was 15 was getting hold of some decent stuff. Smoking, it wasn't the problem. But even I don't like the term broken home, but I understand what it implies. But as someone whose parents separated, and even though thankfully my mother supported me having a relationship with my father, but then going through a divorce, and then unfortunately seeing my children not being supported in having a relationship with their father, I see very clearly where the impact of divorce and separation and family separation would kind of open the door to young adults when it comes to drugs, drink, any form of escapism, really. If your life's shit and you're not happy, you're going to find a way to self-medicate. And coming back to the Gabor, he was talking about being in the womb and picking up on his mother's vibes of being a Jew in Hungary in the Second World War and all this kind of stuff. So we're dealing with maybe even past life stuff, certainly this life stuff, but the whole concept of multi-generational family trauma, where we're all walking around with 2 suitcases full of shit, but then we've also got the stuff from our mother's side, the stuff from our father's side, and the stuff that they got from their parents too. So once we become aware of that, we can start to look at it and deal with it. But as a young man, if it's easy and available to get some weed or to get some alcohol, then where else are you going? It's perfectly normal to look for that. And sadly, culture and society seems to, I think it takes us away from ourselves. It makes a lot of these addictions available and readily available. And I think what you're doing is great work. And it's interesting that you're maybe like this hub of sanity in amongst a chaotic and insane society that a lot of people are getting wounded from, you know?
Yeah. Everything you say there, I would 100% agree with all aspects of it. It's interesting that just in addition to that, I got a letter in the door there back last year, and it was from the Citizens Assembly, and it was in relation to the drug problem in the country at the moment. So I replied, and it was 20,000 letters sent out. It was 18 replies. They were random, democratic. It was done on an organized basis of how to pick the spread across the population. But the bottom line anyway was, I'm involved in that assembly, and the last meeting is they're making recommendations, or we're making recommendations to the government in the next couple of weeks. Last weekend was, if you like, the most for me was the most. I felt the most energized out, and I was really delighted to have been involved in it, because I saw something that made it was like exactly what you're saying. It's great the work that's been done here, and I feel really privileged to be involved in it. And when you see that you can like help somebody in the most smallest aspect of their life, whatever it might be. Young fellow walk away there this evening, come over and shook my hand, and he said, "When will I see you next week?" And I said, "I'll be back here Tuesday." So it's like he likes to see you. So you make a connection with a human being. And some of these lads, they don't have it, and I'm that bit older, so maybe they resonate with me a little bit in the grandparent element of things or whatever. I'm not sure, but somebody that doesn't judge them is a big deal. So I don't judge them, and obviously it works, and I get great relationships with people in here in a very short period of time. But I'm saying that after there's 270 organizations helping people in addiction in this country at the moment, and most of them are separate, ad hoc. Some of them, they get funded from one year to the next. So there's an issue all around that. The pay isn't great in most of it. So there's a huge turnover as that. But what I saw last week was and the research is there to show it, is putting the money into the families, into the young babies, and helping and supporting them. Obviously, even before they get out of nappies, supporting the families in whatever way you can. If it's in cash, get into the schools, help people and support people, educate them out of poverty would be the first thing, and to deal with that family, that generational trauma that you talked about there, because it's, you know, the sins of the father bestowed on the son, such as a quote was made sometime. I think it was the Bible. I think that came out. But in any case, it fits really well for this thing, and I think the realization is there, particularly when you talked about Gabor Mate and his model, and it fits for me because my background is addiction, and I remember taking my first drink at 11. I was self-medicating. I took a bottle of wine out of the press at home, and I took it down and filled the drink because it made me feel good, and I felt really good. And from that moment, I was an alcoholic, and there was no turning me back. It wasn't the physical addiction to alcohol; it was how it made me feel, because I had suffered huge trauma as a child. I didn't understand it, and nobody understood it that well. I stopped drinking when I was 26. And like for about 3 or 4 years afterwards, I was in huge mental turmoil. And as I look here now, it's a place like this I needed to be in. But I didn't know that at the
The
time.
irony isn't lost on either of us, I take it.
Yeah, so I always look at that. And when I look at the young fellas, they remind me of myself when they're getting angry and they're giving me grief or whatever it might be. And I just say the same thing. I was just exactly like you when I was your age, you know.
Yeah.
So, and even when you mentioned the grass, like obviously I smoked a lot when I was a young fella too, and I used to be quite paranoid about it. But I think they've got so good at breeding now. The CBD level in the stuff that's selling on the street is gone down, and it's the THC is the content now that's gone up. Maybe it's gone up 10, 20 fold, and this huge psychosis as a result of it. And obviously there's brain damage to young people, irreversible brain damage done to young people that smoke that type of cannabis now.
But this is not God's natural herb, as in the Rastafarian culture, where, of course, it's there for you to use if it's naturally. What we're dealing with here is man-made,
yeah, more or less
adulterated shite that is being made available to kids that are then going to have mental health issues as a consequence.
Yeah, and we're reliably informed that fentanyl is on its way here in no small way, and that they mix that in with all the different drugs, and you're buying this stuff, but you have this stuff in it. It's 50 times more addictive than heroin. So and what's happening is we've kind of sleepwalked ourselves as a society into this problem. And just to get back to where I was talking about, it's great to do this work, but this is all after the fact. And it's the same with me. My life changed and turned inside out, and I got a great chance, and I worked that 12-step program. And that got me somewhere, and it pushed me into a different way of life that I never could have envisaged. And all sorts of other different things has happened subsequent to that. But it was getting that chance. But the issue was what was going on beforehand, exactly like you said, that, you know, Gabor Mati's mother was traumatized. My mother was extremely traumatized, and it was the same thing. And when I was born, and she had postnatal depression, so she couldn't connect with me. So I was on my own. And yeah, obviously as a young child back all those years ago, you know, who's ever going to pick up on that? I was in a family that people didn't talk. So I experienced all those difficulties, and I've worked my way through them all my life to some degree, and I have what I would call a good quality of life now, and I try to give back as much as I can, and within reason. And I like to have a good quality of life myself. And it's
That's
not about
a beautiful story, man. That's a beautiful story. I love this because I'm just off the back of, on Sunday last week in Limerick, I did a workshop in family constellations therapy. It's the 5th one I've done in about 4 years. And a group of people get together, and we're literally consciously choosing to do healing work on that multi-generational family trauma. And it's something that wasn't available to us when we were younger, but if you weren't ready to embrace any of that stuff, then you wouldn't have listened to anyone anyway, even if it was. But I'm not going to go down the route of the fact that society is that there's a lot of forces invested in breaking up families, causing divorce rates, putting these drugs on the market. There's a lot of organizations that have a vested interest and committed to almost opposing the benefit of humanity the more you dig into it and the more you look at it. So I'm reluctant to go down that route with you, but the proof is there if you want to go look for it. As a kind of an island or an oasis of being able to be that father figure to some of those traumatized young people, it's great to have that opportunity to pay a bit of something back, and sort of, if they're open to listening, you can share with them the benefit of your wisdom. But I'd say it's not so much the words that you're speaking, it's more the things that you're doing. So the hands-on stuff with the gardening and the horticulture, you're not saying, come and listen to me now. You're saying, right, I'm going to show you, this is what we're going to do. And that has an impact on the peace of mind. And you realize when you get to a certain age, peace of mind is everything. You can't put a price on it. Unfortunately, when I was younger, I met someone and had a relationship with someone who I only really saw after it was over, but they had this necessity for there to be drama and conflict and chaos. And when you're caught up in the middle of that and you think that's a normal daily thing, you don't really know anything outside or beyond of that. But when you do step into prioritizing your self-care, your self-worth, your self-esteem, and your peace of mind, all of a sudden you realize this is gold. This is where it's at. Just even if it's just sitting, meditating, I'm not suggesting we all go and sit up on the top of a mountain and meditate, but just spending time in nature, just being in a garden. This is magic. It brings healing and it brings peace. And I'm blessed that I've come from a city in Manchester to a field in Tipperary where I've got birds and cows as my neighbours.
Yeah.
Very few people. Yeah.
I hear you, yeah. So yeah, I interestingly enough is that I've been involved in family constellations myself, and
right.
Found them hugely beneficial.
Yeah.
I really have great energy for that, huge energy for it, and I'm kind of active in it at the minute. So I find it really powerful because particularly with my mother, her line, and my mother was born illegitimate 100 years ago in Ireland, which we didn't have sex before marriage that time. So I don't know how it happened, but anyway,
there was a lot
my
of taboos
grandmother,
around and shame would have been carried and passed through the generations. Yeah,
she died with carrying that shame, and I always felt bad for her in that respect, that she could never come across and get and speak or acknowledge it at any level, and so it was really a difficult journey for her, and her journey I feel was difficult, and she resonates with me hugely. And my mother's dead since 2013, but we had an absolute powerful relationship. But because she had her best friend was a paedophile actually at the time, and he obviously had access to me at the time, and you know what happened there. So I had huge anger as a young lad over that, and my mother wasn't able to acknowledge it, and she wasn't able to deal with it. And
I'm sorry to hear that, man.
Yeah, well, that was part of it. I don't feel bad about it in that sense, but I do realize it seeped into every aspect of my life, and it was only as I got really older I saw how detrimental that whole affair was for me. Even though I didn't hold huge anger against the actually perpetrator, and that's how subtle these people are to get in where there's an issue. And I mentioned the word broken family because that's where I came from in that respect. It looked like a lovely nucleus of a family, but there was inside it there was the dynamics that difficult is the word. And my own marriage broke up in that sense, and my own young fella suffered as a result of that. So I saw that happening in front of me. And that's where I see that there's a huge issue there in respect of how we support ourselves as a community, and I think that's where we need to be looking further and further. So that's part of my journey in that respect. I remember I got involved in. I go to that campus down not too far away from you there, down in Erskine, and I've been going down there for 7 or 8 years, and I actually found my voice down there in relation to singing. So I got involved with this harmony singing, and I can sing in bass. But it had a huge effect on me, and I didn't realize the power of singing involved with a group has on me. It was absolutely transformational. I got involved with the drumming, obviously, and that's another thing. So it's only after the fact I realized and I found out I knew that these things had a huge effect on me because I wanted to do it again. But I saw the research is there for it, so it supports it. It's really transformational how we synergize with each other when we're in these areas, and that there's great healing in that itself.
Yeah.
So within my own family, I didn't have a strong voice, and that's helped me to develop myself in that area and to kind of pull myself out from under being under that this unseen and unspoken cloud, if you like, and it's based down coming from the family, if you like, line. Is certain areas you don't talk, you don't discuss this stuff, and this stuff is thrown in a box, and we leave it in the box, and it's like this big elephant sitting in the room that everybody walks around all the time. and we play into this narrative, and we follow that whole process mindlessly, if you like, most of our lives, until maybe sometimes we get shook up. So there's merit in being shook up, and there's merit in ending up being an addict to some degree, because for me, it like I said before, it's given me a life that I never thought would have been possible. And that's that little bit of peace of mind. I also got involved, like what you describe as meditation, and that was transformational as well. So I've got down to the point where I do like 14 days of silent meditation. I do that with the Signata in County Clare, and with Nick Scott and Claren Bridge, and that's been absolutely, powerful.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm surprised
Pardon?
we didn't meet up on one. Nick Scott's using the Brothers of Charity place there for the what is it called in the park? They bring the disabled children off to Lords and stuff.
Yes.
Beautiful environment.
Beautifulness, beautiful.
Yeah, and you're walking in the forest and getting up at 6 a.m. and you just got a day full of walking and sitting meditation. I love it. I'd recommend it to anybody. And if I don't do it at least once a year myself, I'd be really champing at the next opportunity, because it's like just a chance to recharge your batteries and refocus and really assess and come back to what's what. And I think it's huge to be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, entirely. Yeah, because there's so much, like, if you like, it takes you out, you get grounded, you go quiet, and even at the end of it, like there's nearly a reluctance to speak, because you're feeling so good. And I'd often speak about it here, and the guys would be looking at me, how could you actually stay silent for that length of time? Like, and so the people can't, young fellas, young girls can't get that into the concept of it. But when I was that age, I couldn't have had either, and I wouldn't have had it.
I wouldn't have heard it. When I was a young fella, I was too busy rolling joints and drinking pints and sharking on the pool table and the jukebox.
Yeah. I used to drive a motorbike, and I was wild young fella. Yeah, so I think I had ADHD as well. Interestingly enough,
I think we all had a good dose of that, didn't we?
I'm still disorganized. I think I'll carry that one.
Whatever it was they were putting in those ejections that we got in school, where we were queued up in the corridor, shaking like a shitting dog, waiting to get stuck with a needle of God knows what. In them days, and the parents are like, let them off. The school, if the school are doing it, it must be okay for them.
So, well, there's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, it's without going back into the point that we discussed. It's that, like, we handed over our power to these people in a mass scale, and the results are there. And we have to learn. And if you look at the world in a grand scale, like, wherever it's coming from, we're heading down into real chaos, and that has to happen for things to change, because that's where the change came from me. And it says, as within as without. So we're a reflection of the world that's around us, and the world is a reflection of us internally. So everything's connected in that respect. So there's a craziness in the world today it's there because the craziness is in the people, if you like, and we've allowed ourselves to be party to it for whatever, and there can be any number of different reasons, but a lot of it is because we just enjoy a quality of life, so we're allowing and being silent in so many other different areas, and allowing other stuff to go on unhindered because it doesn't affect us, because maybe there's a selfishness around it. It's our innate capacity to be selfish, which is tremendous as human beings, but we have this survival instinct in it. But at the same time, as a group, I think it's pretty clear to me that we're going downhill at a rapid rate, and maybe that's the way it has to be until something changes, and then the shift came. And I found that personally myself. I had a massive shift back many years ago, where actually I had this kind of you could call it some sort of an awakening, where I just got this sense of peace about myself, and I didn't have an issue with anybody. And I had like little resentments and anger and stuff going on with people. And I met these people, and I sorted all those situations out within that time frame. And I was like, this is too good to be true. Like, because there was I could go speak to people because there was no pride in place there. There was nothing there if somebody was going to tell me to get lost, I wasn't going to feel bad about it. And that lasted for about 10 days. And then I kind of just came back to what I would describe as being my normal self. But within that time frame, I saw something or I felt something that was really extraordinary. And that has been profound for me, that the capacity to forgive and let stuff go. And I think that still, it can still be challenging for me today to do it in particularly with my own family. I'm fine outside of the family, but when there's emotions in there, like it's a different context, as you can see. And obviously I had to do it with my ex and stuff like that. And that's been, I had to sell a bit of land and to settle the divorce. And, it was a farm that I got my mother. My dad had it, and it is in the family and that stuff. So that went down the drain. So there was a little bit of energy went along with that. But listen, that's life. You only get the one piece, and it's being attached to things then is another issue, isn't it? So
yeah,
let go all the time.
I think you mentioned Sunyata Buddhist Center. I've been going there for the last 15 years as a sort of Sangha member, and it was a good while ago now. I remember one of the Buddhist monks that came, lovely fella called Amaranato, and he said, lads, I've been a monk for 20 odd years, but if you think you've achieved any kind of clarity and peace in your mind, all it takes is a weekend back at home with your mother. If and he's like, and I've got an 84-year-old Jewish mother, and I can tell you I wasn't very peaceful dealing with my mother. She was triggering me, talking to me like he's like a man, he's a monk in his 50s for 30 odd years, and you can just imagine this dynamic of going back to his 80-year-old Jewish mother. And it was beautiful the way he put it, because he obviously loves her to bits, and we have those family connections. But by God, if you think you've proceeded anywhere down a road towards enlightenment, just go and spend the weekend with your mother and see just see how enlightened you are.
That's for sure.
So there's constant challenges. I feel I was always drawn to Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy, but I feel more comfortable these days with the more shamanic and natural, pagan, even sort of mystery school teachings, where I've definitely gone through a little bit of what you've described there in terms of my own journey. Let's get into a couple of questions for you. Have you ever jumped out of a plane?
No, actually, you never did.
Have you ever driven a Ferrari?
I have, yeah.
Have you ever been abducted by aliens?
Not to my knowledge.
Have you ever eaten an insect?
No. I swallowed a good few of them on a motorbike, but never intentionally.
I'd say more than most people if you were open-mouthed on a motorbike, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever walked on hot coals?
No, I thought about it, but I never did it.
Have you ever done any public speaking?
I did a little bit, yeah.
And have you ever written a book?
No, but it's something that I think about too.
I don't think that'd be beyond you, given what you've told us so far.
I think you're right, yeah. I think there's
I'll talk to you again about that, because I do a nice bit of work on the side, helping people who have a story to tell. Well, I say on the side, it's not really on the side. It's actually great healing work and spiritual work, where I help people who have a story to tell and want to share the story of their journey, but they don't really look at themselves as a published author. And we tease the story out of them and turn it into a book, and it's beautiful work, and I'm very privileged and very honored to do that. So we might talk again on that. Have you ever cheated death?
Yes. Several times, yeah.
What are your favorite books, and is there any that you'd recommend to people, and why?
Right now, off the top of my head, I couldn't give you one.
Short answer. That was quick.
Actually, I have one now. I got off a guy about doing a cleanse. I can't actually recall the name of it, but it's about taking a cleanse, using olive oil on a weekly basis, taking a
Right.
couple of things and doing this it's a colonic kind of a cleanse. So I'm going to embark on that when I read the book. So I'll tell you more about it when I have the book right. So me and names of books are just off the walls.
Is there any books you've read that have changed your life, or has a lot of your knowledge in life come from experiential and doing things rather than reading things?
Yeah, yeah. I read a lot of Krishnamurti over years, and I found him really profound. Osho as well. The guy, I can't think the guy who he wrote the book on the travels into South America. What was it? He wrote several of them.
Carlos Castaneda.
No, it wasn't him. There's another one I'm reading which is brilliant. It's about equality.
Yeah.
And it's basically, you've read that book, have you? It's brilliant, but the book is basically is that where there's inequality in society, you're going to have all the issues we have today. Where there's equality, you're going to have much, much less. And they've shown that in Scandinavia, the models are there, where the inequality causes all these drug issues and this dysfunction that we have in the society. So that because people don't feel that, and like I suppose the other elephant in the room here is that there's nobody. I don't see Ireland as being a hugely racist country, but I definitely see there's an issue here, and it would a significant amount of people in relation to the traveller population. It's all very fine. So we say about this, that, and the other, but don't talk to me about that one. So the point I want to make to it, without getting into it, is that we don't have to say or do anything to anybody, but once we feel it inside us, people are going to unconsciously know that. So we're sending a message, and it's unconscious in us that I don't like you and I don't like your style of life, and the reaction is almost negative back. So inadvertently, we ostracize a community, and there's zero hope of that coming together as we sit here today. And it's not something that can be lectured about or can be spoken about, because you don't change people's mindset in that respect. But it's something that we have to look at as an individual and maybe go into the schools and work on it when people are children. But it's only like when I go home and speak to my children about what's going on, or I'm speaking to an adult and they're listening to me. That's where the child is picking up the information. And we say, for example, when I grew up, like there was pretty heavy duty republicanism, because there was a lot of problems and there was a hunger striker. So I was young and I was impressionable in that respect. So I was hugely Republican in that respect. I'm still Republican to that, but I wouldn't be for violence of any kind today.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
if
nothing wrong with that.
Children were educated and to read the Bunreacht na hÉireann, then there'd be less problems, because your constitutional rights as a sovereign being in a republic, it's the right to assemble peacefully, it's the right to bear arms, and it's the right to speak up and to speak your truth. And they're being eroded at every turn by, whether it's your New World Order, whether it's your European Union, whether it's your World Economic Forum or whatever. But I noticed that they kind of infiltrated that movement and tarred it with whatever else to discredit it. And these days you're considered a far-right lunatic if you believe in something as simple as, Irish people living on Irish land.
Yeah, but I certainly wouldn't be advocating violence from my own perspective. I don't think it helps solve anything, and that's
you can't be reading Krishnamurti, probably one of the greatest philosophers of
I see that
the last century anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that would be kind of strong on me. And like I would have been reactive as a younger man, like obviously, and I wouldn't have been slow about getting angry or getting into scraps or whatever it might have been at the time. But I see the futility of them now, because it's like everything else. Things happened to me when I was a child, and I remember a young fella in school, and interesting little story is that this guy he was in a class a year ahead of me, and I don't know, something happened in the schoolyard, and he spat straight in my face, and the whole thing finished up anyway. But that smell of spit in my face stuck with me, and I couldn't get it off. And even as I speak about it now, it's like 50 odd years ago or more. And I remember that. And that's what he did. He spat in my face. So my point is, we never forget when we are violent with somebody else, or you hit somebody else, or you do harm to them, they never forget that. Like, and it's the same with an animal. When you're violent to an animal, they never forget that. And somebody else will get it. It mightn't be you that's going to get it back, but some innocent party. Particularly, I'd knock around horses, so I would see that with horses, and it's the same with dogs as well. Like, the horse will give back what he gets, and he'll kick out at somebody or he'll throw somebody off because he's reacting to a previous hurt somewhere along the way. And we're innate like that as well. So we're reactive people, and we give back. When we don't know any better, then we just continue to do this stuff. And until we know, like I think it's Mariangela says, when we know better, we can do better. And that's how I'm involved in with that an equine assisted learning at the moment. And I find it hugely powerful because, connecting with a horse, the horse will, it's like a photographic memory. It actually gives you an instant communication as to know how you're right now. So if you're walking around, for example, with a horse and suddenly he stops, he's picking up something on you.
Excuse me, there's a fly doing yoga on my laptop, and he's
I
just,
can see him. Yeah, he looks
he's wandering around in front of the webcam. It's gas, isn't it? It's literally, he's just stretching and doing this and then reaching down, and it's like I've literally got flies doing yoga on my computer. It's just, you couldn't make it up. Like, I don't know. My friend in West Cork his partner does this equine kind of Reiki, and I'd be really interested in doing something like that. She's one of 2 or 3 people that have mentioned it to me about working with horses, and I see my own journey, and now I've progressed into doing healing work with people, and it's not going to be long before I'm laying there on a couch with the blankets and it's surrounded by a couple of horses. I can feel it happening already. Shout out to Mick and Ellie if they're watching us. Tell me a bit more about your experiences doing that.
Well, I'll just give you a very simple scenario. Was when we went there first, the lady was looking after us, Jill. She just said to us randomly, take that small little miniature pony. Myself and Melanie was another new person. I didn't know Melanie either. Just take the pony for a walk around the arena. So we walked around the arena and work it between the two of you. So this went on for a while, and we were going walking here, and then suddenly the pony stopped and he wouldn't move. So it was, I didn't know what was going on, so we couldn't get the pony to move. This happened on a couple of different occasions with me, and what I found was, and it's something that was unconscious in me, is that I take things for granted. So, for example, everything was working well, and I was kind of communicating in my own mind with Melanie that she was working along an area, but she was following her own agenda, and I was assuming that she was working with me in that respect. So there was a little bit of me taken for granted. So then she had something else going on, and I was like, oh, I could feel a pull, and I could feel this thing that she was kind of pulling away from where I was actually going physically. And so it was creating a pull in me. I was starting to feel the energy rise in me. Like, what's she doing there? What's she doing? So the pony stopped. And it was basically, he had picked up on the energy nearly before anybody had done anything in that respect. So that was what it showed me, was that part of me that takes things for granted and allows stuff to go along. And I've done that. I can have that at home. Sometimes I can walk out the door and the guys would say to me, well, where were you? And I said, did I not tell you? I was gone for a day or so, and I mightn't have just said it. It's some things I take for granted. And it just showed up that aspect of my own personality. And I've been working with individuals as well, and I've seen people come around by connecting with the horse. The horse was letting them know, so the horse would move. And you'd ask them, well, what's going on here? And they'd say, well, listen, I was wondering, was I annoying the horse or aggravating the horse? A horse is only two languages. It's either yes or it's no. There's no in between. So if you can't make your mind up, you get a little bit confused, the horse will stop or he'll do something different because he doesn't get it. And that's how they reflect themselves right back to you straight away within. So if you're getting angry, the horse will disappear. So for example, she let 6 people walk over to 3 horses. And within a couple of seconds of the 6 people walking over nice and without being intrusive or being aggressive, the horses were gone to the furthest possible place they could find in the arena. And what was happening there was somebody's energy or collective energy, whoever it might have been, were just pushing the horses, and they picked up on it and they disappeared. They don't want to know about it. So if you're angry, you're pissed off, you go out to a horse, he doesn't want to know about it. So you jump up on a horse and you try to work with a horse and you're getting angry. So you have a real problem underneath you. So therefore you have the horses reacting in that way. But in the therapeutic sense, he's giving you back really powerful information that you can take away and work on. So that's when it works. And it can bring up huge amount of emotion. Because a horse's energy feels 6 times more powerful than ours.
Yeah.
Once you sit close to a horse, you feel that energy. And it really makes you, horses make us emotional. And we're not even aware of it. But we know that, like you like them and I like them, they're kind of like, you know, once you get involved with horses, you're always involved with them at some level or another because there's that huge attraction there.
Well, this is the thing. I never got involved yet. But when I was a child, the only time I ever saw horses was at Main Road at the city matches. And there'd be just these fucking huge things with a policeman on the back with his truncheon ready, as if to say, you know, so these were something to be feared. These were huge, tall, magnificent beasts of things, and they weren't your friend. They were there to fucking, you know, make sure you toed the line. And then in school we learned in, I think, history about the massacre of Peterloo in 1819, where soldiers on horseback basically crushed the people that were assembling to speak up about the working conditions of the poor in Manchester, in the poorhouses and the workhouses. So I don't know if it was just growing up in Manchester, but I never really had any experiences of horses in a positive light. It was either the police on horseback or the race horses that you saw on the television or in the bookies. So I'm happy to unlearn all of that and open up a new chapter with that going forward, for sure. Yeah. Any favorite songs or favorite movies, if there's not too many favorite books come to mind?
It's interesting with the movies. I suppose Shawshank Redemption was one of the ones that stuck with me. I really like that. Yeah. It was a fabulous movie. It was, I watched that a couple of times. What was it? Oh, the Eagles. I love the Eagles. I love some of their Eagles music. Pink Floyd was always a major favorite of mine. Some Elton John, Rod Stewart. I used to love Rod Stewart because he kind of sang about stuff that was, you know, I just felt that disconnected myself somewhere along the way, and it resonated with me. And then the Eagles stuff, really, I love it as well. And I think it's generational. It's interesting. I have a 17-year-old son now, and he loves them as well. And he picked it up himself, you know.
That's cool.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. He loves his music and stuff. So they would be hugely influential for me. I love those bands. I love the music, and actually dancing is another thing that I really like. I really got into dancing in the last number of years. All kinds of dancing, like waltzing, slow waltz, foxtrot, quick step, jiving. I've actually taken up salsa there now lately, and Irish set dancing is the best of them all by a long shot.
Irish step dancing.
Irish set dancing. Set
dancing.
Set. So it's you dance in sets of 8, and you're swinging in and out to really fast Irish music. And
that keep you fit.
That would keep you fit. These dances go on for about 3 hours, and they do 8 sets. And within each set, there's about another 6 sets approximately. So you're talking about that many sets. And I'll tell you, that's a workout.
Yeah.
And there's a buzz in that now that's just unreal. Yeah, dancing. They've shown dancing. Researches around dancing is really good, really positive, as well as that interaction with another person. That's really, really positive. And the movement, the synchronicity together. It's like the singing and the drumming. Anything that we're synchronizing with each other, it resonates. And we sit in rooms with each other and we talk and we resonate, like yourself and myself. That's always healing. There's always positivity coming in that. So there's a lot of connection, and it's adhering to that connection and being involved in it. I think it really helps us as individuals, and brings something, the real aspect of us out, because we are tribal, so we are individuals, but we come from a tribal background, and we're born into a family network. And I think that family network is smaller and smaller. So the old African saying was, it takes a village to rear a child, and I think that's hugely effective. The more positive influence a child has from older people, it really helps them and grounds them, because they say, you're once the man, twice the child, and at the same time, when a child grows up and they can go through this phase as teenagers, but when they settle down, they revert back to the old type, if you like. So the stuff that their grandparents and their parents would have done, you end up. And I've seen that in myself, where I've gone back and you get the, there's maybe even a little bit of conservatism come into your thinking in some respects, but you do the things that they did to some degree because they're innate in you. You grew up doing them, and I would say that my oldest son is 28, and he wouldn't have the work ethic that I would have. He's very laid back character, and I struggled really. I struggled to accept that he only wanted to do a little bit, because I'd be saying, well, listen, you could do this and you could try this and stuff. No, he just, once he finished work, he don't want to know about it, and he wouldn't be interested in doing anything on a Saturday, and I would be trying to get him involved in the garden and stuff. That's not his forte. He's not interested, so I had to let that go. So I obviously hadn't that much of an influence on him in that respect, I went off and I done coaching, and he comes to mind because he would have been my greatest teacher, because I would have had the most difficulty with him as a young teenager. Because when myself and my ex-wife parted company, it became quite acrimonious, and it became very difficult, and we had shared parenting, and it was 50-50, and the communication was very poor, and the children suffered as a result, and I realized that to my own detriment in that respect. And I was given a piece of information at the time by a guy, got professional help around it, and he was brilliant. It was Tom Darcy in Silver Arch, and he said to me, any issue you're having with your wife, and whatever it might be, he said, when you're pissing your wife off, he said, it's you're pissing your kids off, because he said she's going back, and she's going back into the house, and she's in bad junior or whatever it is, and she's going to take it out on the kids. They're going to know it, even if they don't feel it, they're going to know it unconsciously. And that was the end of this texting over and back, this, texting, you were this and you did that and you should have done this, and all that kind of blame game going on, because there's an emotional pain going on, and so you're trying to project onto other people. That's finished. That was the most powerful piece of advice I got. But he always challenged me, because he became, he responded to that, the difficulty that was there within the bigger family network, and I had to work, and I didn't know how it was ever going to come around, because there was this kind of energy between us that, he was my son and I loved him, but we didn't have this connection that we could talk openly to each other. I just couldn't, and I'd seen that in my own family, because we grew up in that environment where stuff wasn't discussed, and I still have my older brother. That would be the case today, and I'm sure he would acknowledge it. We don't really. He would have great friends and chat with them, and himself and myself, we don't have that synergy. I've tried to, if you like, come around it at certain times over the years, but it's not finished that will be the way it ends. But that's the way it is currently. But my oldest son, anyway, I went off and I did a coaching course, and part of the coaching course was to take away this feedback from people and ask people to give feedback on you in certain different areas. And I gave it to him, obviously for good reason. He was in the early 20s at the time, and he wrote on the thing. A young fella that was, not hugely communicative to me, but he wrote on the thing, I don't always get on with you, but you are my father and I love you. And I was looking at this, what he wrote down on a piece of paper, and I was like, I just could not believe that he was brave enough to put that down on a piece of paper at that age of his life, like, and acknowledge that. That's stuff that we wouldn't have spoken of, because obviously I wouldn't be hugely in that way with my kids. I'd give them a hug and all that stuff as they're younger, but as they got older, that little bit of a thing started they grew into men, and you step back a little bit, so you're less likely to be hands-on with them. But that he had the bravery and the resolve to come out with that statement, to be kind of like, that really was a really telling thing. It was hugely powerful for me, and I had great regard for him for doing it. And it was a huge step in breaking that ice that was between us, that unspoken energy that was there. That was like a big block of ice that I couldn't see my way around or how I was going to get around it and improve our relationship. Now we still have our moments, but we got past that piece. And I feel great for that, because that was a big challenge for me. Huge one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to go there, but I can relate to a lot of that in a difficult relationship with my own son, who's 21 or 22 now. And yeah, hopefully there'll be some thawing of that ice block there. Yeah. Tell me, what was your best trip abroad and why?
That's interesting. I have a friend down in Cork, a Kenyan lady, and she was talking to me a few years ago. She said she was going home, and did I want to come? And I was like, yeah, thanks for the invitation. But I didn't really think about it. I was talking to somebody one day. I said, I got an invite to Kenya. And she said, are you going? I said, God, I'm not really. I was a little bit kind of under the radar there with my outlook at the time. And she said to me, are you crazy? Will you go? So I said, yeah, I could be hugely influenced easily sometimes. If somebody said to me, go do that, I could just jump up and go do it, Because sometimes it's about making that decision myself, I used to be indecisive, but now I'm not too sure. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that would be an issue with me from time to time. But anyway, I decided to go to Kenya. And I went to Kenya. And it was actually quite a difficult holiday. I spent nearly almost a month out there. I was in Nairobi, I was in Mombasa, I was in up near the Nakuru, and I was up in the mountains where they grow the tea, and people so fresh looking and fit. When you walk out your back door, you're looking down like 200 or 300 yards down, like at about 45 degrees, and then up again, another houses across the base. You have to walk everywhere. So
there's a reason they're winning all them marathons, boy.
That's bloody.
You
that's
win a marathon, get a Kenyan.
Yeah, but not all of them. Funny enough, I saw terrible poverty. I saw terrible inequality, and I saw terrible addiction. And coming from my own background there, I could see that the unemployment in the early 20s, teenagers over 65%, and that was the research. There's probably more than that. You're probably talking 80% of them unemployed, and they were making up their own drink. And they're eating this leaf. I can't remember the name of the leaf they were eating, but it would rot your teeth, literally just rot your teeth and damage you in all sorts of ways. I can't recall what it was, but the drink they were making up, obviously, some of them weren't that skilled at making it, so they were forgetting to take the top off it, and they were going blind, and they were making obnoxious stuff then that was maybe poisonous. And even if it was making good stuff, it was so strong, there's a huge amount of brain damage there because they're drinking this pure alcohol, or almost pure alcohol, very strong alcohol rather, not pure. And so I set up a couple of AA meetings out there, and there was just one day within 24 hours, 17 people turned up to a meeting, and it was extraordinary. It was
So you got this random invitation to Kenya that you weren't going to bother with, and then and then you ended up conducting AA meetings out there for addiction-ridden young Kenyans.
Yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, that's interesting.
And you haven't written your book yet.
But anyway, I'm not finished. I think I'll go back next year, because there's always been that thing left behind me that I checked, and I tried to support. I was supporting them through WhatsApp here for a long time. And I remember I was in touch with the Kenyan embassy, and the only people that I could get within the AA realm was somebody in South Africa. There was, I think, from my understanding, I think it was about 8 addiction meetings, AA orientated, in Kenya, and that's with 45 million odd people. And a lot of these meetings would be based on, class, and you'd have to have a few quid to be getting into them. And it's interesting, with no respect, but a lot of people were looking for money to go to these meetings as well. They were looking for the price of the bus and whatever. So there was so many different issues because the culture was so different. So I could talk for an hour and a half about what went on out there, but it was really interesting to see that people got well there, and some people didn't. But it's like the same here. If at least you're giving them the chance and you're giving them the opportunity to do something different. But what I took out of it was that the civilization that we know as of today, and going out there and we impose it on another culture, this seems to be the end result. It is huge, devastating effects in these cultures. And Kenya is, even though it's one of the more progressive countries, my understanding, in Kenya or in Africa, the situation is dreadful on the ground, and how people try to survive, and they're out there selling, bottles of water on the side of the street, packets of chewing-gum. They're selling anything. They go in here, they buy this thing, and they sell that. And it's people living in these little galvanized, rusted sheds with a family, and they have a sink, and they have a little curtain that you pull. That's your bedroom, and that's your washing facilities, and they're all done up in a cement block, and people sit on. The quality of life is just, the drinking water is coming in a bucket. It's all really, really, really basic and really difficult.
Wake up call to see that, I'd say.
It's absolutely, and to see how people, and people thrive there as well. But there are other issues, and they're hugely significant issues.
Well, I'm pretty sure they all knew how to live before the white man came along with his missionaries and his guns and his money, when they lived in harmony with the land. But there's a lot of romanticism of that kind of sort of way of life. But it was tough. But yeah, totally agree with you there, man.
Yeah, I came across an orphanage there where they're bringing in children. There was children, reportedly, from what I understood, was that they were trafficked. African children went from Cameroon. They went from Cameroon over to France, and they were back, and they ended up in Kenya. And from what they tell me is that they pick up these children in the street, and they drop them at the orphanage, and they'd know their name, but they wouldn't know who their family was. They didn't know when they were born. They had no identity. So they're street children, and nobody would have any great interest in them. But the orphanage will do stuff for them and help them and support them. Some of the people really, they succeed out because they get that little bit of education. Somebody cares somewhere. So they always say that if you have one good person in your life, regardless of what your circumstances, if somebody believes in you and they put their faith in you and come and check in with you at some level, that's all you need to succeed in what is becoming a more hostile environment around us every day of the week. It's more difficult than a jungle living in the current world that we have today and what we're providing for our children. So that's the benefit of what's happening. So there's always good things. There's always a lot of people go out there and do a lot of work over the years and just building stuff. And that chap that goes out, I think it's South Africa, and they build the houses. There's a few of them going on in Kenya, but the people have to learn. It's giving them the tools to do it themselves is more important. And you can keep pouring money into those situations. I don't think it helps. It has to come from the grassroots, and people have to help and develop the skills themselves to cope. And because there's a huge issue with, we'd have it here, and what you might see as a superficial level, but there's corruption there is on another level altogether. Everybody's paying everybody off on a continual basis, and it's just the way of life, and that's how they survive. We would have had it here. Ireland would have been hugely corrupt over the years. It's still very corrupt, but we're on a different level now than where we were. At least things are more transparent now, and it's not as easy to be getting away with stuff like it would have been one time, because there's not a wink here in this country. Because I think the culture was there was so much issues with the British occupation here that when we were going against the powers that be at the time, it was definitely looked upon in a positive light. So anything you could take off the powers that be, that's what we did. Anyway, the way I see it today is that anything that's not mine, I shouldn't be taking it. And I think energetically that's important, because I think, if I'm taking something that belongs to somebody else, that's theirs, and it's not good for me to be taking it. The other thing I picked up along the way was people say, when I get difficulties, we say, for example, I talked about that trauma, and I talked about the difficulties that I had in the marriage and the divorce and that stuff, that it builds up energy in you. So you hold it, storing other people's energy. And I've learned a little bit around that as well, about letting that stuff go. That my understanding today is that my own energy will do me no harm, but other people's energy sitting in me will make me unwell and actually make me sick eventually if I let it go. And it's making sure that I leave back what's mine what's not mine back to them and pull back what's mine from theirs. And I do that. I've done that, and I've done that with my ex. Done that with several people that I would have had issues with over the years, in order to try and keep myself right. And that's what it's about. I think for me, the bottom line is how I keep myself right. And if I can do that, at least, maybe there's a hope that, my children are learning a little bit, that they will do it. And people that are really around me and close to me, that, I can provide and do the right thing for them. And it's only a simple little thing, but I wouldn't be a huge advocate of teaching, if you like, in that respect. I think that's another realm. I think it's in doing and demonstrating how we are is more important, in my view, today anyway. I think.
Yeah, we seem to get kids and take them, and we might have experienced it ourselves, where we're taught to talk and we're taught to walk, and then we're told to sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
Before I finish up with a 1-minute quickfire round, have you got a glitch in the matrix story? Anything happened to you that defied the laws of physics or reality, that made you question, who am I? What am I doing here? What the fuck is going on?
Well, I guess I suppose when my marriage broke up, that was the first time I had a real powerful realization. It came after I stopped drinking for a while. I was like, what am I at here? What's going on here? But my mind was very cloudy. But it was after the marriage thing, because I saw myself as with this parent and provider and all that kind of stuff. And then I wasn't that anymore. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to be doing here? And what's going on? So that was a pretty interesting moment for me. But I think, that kind of question, it's never too far away from me, exactly what I'm doing here. And to realize that, like, I have been here for a while, even though my mind would tell me that I'm not here that long. But the reality is I'm here longer now than what I'm going to be in the future. And that's significant. So my reality is changing on a continual basis. I might think that it's staying the same, and my life is habitual in some respects, but it's not. And everything I'm experiencing is different. So coming to terms with who I am, and this part of this grown older as a man, is another thing that as well as that, I got thrown off a horse, and I crushed 2 bones in my back. So I kind of defied the physics in some respects.
Horses again.
Horses again, yeah. Yeah, and so that was a lucky one. So there was a couple of them. So yeah, I wouldn't have had much other than that in that respect. That would be about it, I think. Yeah.
Cool. So it's been a pleasure being able to reconnect and have the chat and listen to you. I will follow up with you offline about if you're serious about writing your book. I don't see that is something that should be delayed any further. You have a beautiful story to share with the world. Well done to you for all the work you do. And we'll finish up with a 1-minute quick fire round here. And thanks for being my guest on the October MenScape podcast, Kieran.
You're welcome. Thank you.
England or Germany?
England.
Sunset or sunrise?
Sunset.
Blonde or brunette?
Brunette.
Manchester or Liverpool?
Manchester.
Brown or pink?
Pink.
Kerry or Dublin?
Kerry.
Spots or stripes?
Stripes.
I think we know the answer to this one. Gardening or the gym?
Both, actually.
Boccherini or Echo and the Bunnymen?
Who was the first one?
Boccherini.
Who's Boccherini?
Boccherini is, I think he's a 17th century classical composer of quintets with the cello and stuff like that. Beautiful kind of music. I'll send you on some and you can have a listen yourself.
I think probably him. Yeah, I love classical.
You're the only person that's ever asked that. I'm surprised nobody asked me before, but you know. Sun or moon?
Moon.
Emerald or ruby?
Emerald.
Silver or gold?
Silver.
Beer or wine?
Wine.
Meat or cheese?
Meat.
Onions or carrots?
Onions.
Hurling or rugby?
Rugby.
Pizza or Chinese?
Chinese.
Salt or pepper?
Salt.
And finally, forest or beach?
Oh, that's a tough one. Yeah. Forest, probably, yeah.
Well done, Kieran. Thanks for your time again today, and take care and mind yourself, and God bless, sir.
All right, Carol. Thank you. Cheers. Take it easy.
MenScape, the podcast with Carl.J. Ashley.